Imagine a world where the Americas had never been colonized. A world where the vibrant cultures and societies of indigenous peoples continued to flourish, unrestrained by the intrusion of European powers. This is not a simple thought experiment, but a speculative narrative, one that opens up an uncharted course of history, teeming with possibilities and implications, not just for the Americas, but for the rest of the world. In this world, the indigenous peoples of the Americas would have been free to develop their societies, cultures, technologies, and economies without external interference. They would have shaped their own destinies, forged their own paths, and written their own histories. The course of global politics, economics, culture, and environmental development would have been fundamentally different. Think about it. What kind of societies would the indigenous nations of the Americas have built if they had been left to their own devices? What kind of technologies and cultural practices would they have developed? And how would these developments have impacted the world beyond the Americas? The ripple effects of this alternate history scenario would have extended far beyond the Americas. The global political landscape would have been dramatically different without the influence of European colonial powers in the Americas. African diaspora, shaped so significantly by the transatlantic slave trade, would have followed a different trajectory. Economic impacts would have been substantial as well. Trade networks, agricultural exchanges, the flow of goods and ideas, all of these would have been fundamentally different in a world where the Americas were never colonized. This uncolonized Americas would have been a hub of cultural exchanges. Indigenous cultures would have continued to evolve, diversify, and interact with each other in unique ways, contributing to a rich tapestry of scientific and philosophical knowledge. And let's not overlook the environmental considerations. Land use, conservation practices, biodiversity, all would have been shaped by the indigenous peoples of the Americas according to their own understandings and relationships with the natural world. So, let's embark on this journey into the unknown, into an uncharted course of history. Let's explore this speculative narrative and see where it takes us. What would the world look like if the Americas remained untouched by colonization? Let's find out. The Americas, free from colonization, would chart their own course. Picture this: a world where the indigenous nations of the Americas continued to grow and thrive, untouched by European influence. The diverse tribes, from the Iroquois in the north to the Inca in the south, would have expanded, forming powerful confederacies and empires. Technological advancements would likely have followed a different trajectory. Instead of steel and gunpowder, the indigenous societies might have perfected the use of obsidian and copper, creating tools and weapons uniquely suited to their environment. The wheel, primarily used as a toy in our timeline, could have been adapted for practical uses, revolutionizing transportation and trade across the vast continent. Culturally, the indigenous nations would have continued to develop in their own unique ways. The rich tapestry of languages, spiritual beliefs, and artistic traditions would have deepened and diversified, each culture influencing and being influenced by its neighbors. The advanced astronomy of the Mayans, the elaborate city planning of the Aztecs, the democratic governance of the Iroquois, all these could have been honed and refined over centuries, leading to societies as complex and sophisticated as any in the Old World. Without European diseases decimating their populations, these societies might have grown exponentially. The Americas could have become a densely populated continent with sprawling cities and bustling marketplaces. The political landscape would have been shaped by alliances and rivalries, trade agreements and wars, just like anywhere else in the world. In this alternate timeline, the indigenous nations of the Americas would not be isolated. They would explore and interact with the rest of the world, but on their own terms. They might establish trade routes across the Pacific, exchanging maize and potatoes for silk and spices. They might send ambassadors to the courts of China and Persia, sharing their knowledge and learning from others. The indigenous nations of the Americas would have continued to flourish, developing unique cultures and technologies. This alternate history paints a vibrant picture of what might have been, a world where the Americas chart their own course, shaping their destiny and leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of human civilization. A world without the colonization of the Americas would significantly alter the global political landscape. Let's start with Europe. The late 15th century was a time of flourishing empires and burgeoning nationalism. Spain and Portugal, the first to venture into the New World, gained vast wealth and power from their American colonies. But imagine a world where their ships returned empty-handed, where the promise of gold and spices remained an elusive dream. The balance of power in Europe would likely have shifted, with other nations such as France, England, and the Ottoman Empire potentially rising to greater prominence. Without the influx of American wealth, the economic landscape of Europe would have drastically changed. Spain may have remained a minor regional power, while the British and French, unburdened by expensive colonial ventures, could have focused their resources on continental affairs, possibly leading to a more unified Europe much earlier in history. Moving on to the African diaspora, the transatlantic slave trade was a direct consequence of the colonization of the Americas. Without the demand for labor in the New World, millions of Africans might have been spared the horrors of slavery. African societies would have continued to develop independently, potentially leading to powerful and prosperous kingdoms. The absence of the slave trade might have also prevented the widespread destabilization and conflict that plagued many African regions. However, this doesn't mean that interactions between different regions would cease. Trade networks could still have developed, but they would likely have looked very different. Without American silver flowing into China through the Spanish Philippines, for instance, the dynamics of the global economy would have changed, possibly leading to the rise of alternative trade routes and power centers. And yet, this speculation is more than an exercise in what-ifs. It's a reflection on the profound impact of historical events on the world we live in today. It reminds us that the world is shaped not only by its triumphs, but also by its tragedies. The world stage would have been a different tableau with different players and alliances. And while we can't change the past, we can learn from it, using our understanding of history to build a better future. Economic exchanges would have followed a different path. Picture this: a world where the intricate trade networks of the Americas were allowed to evolve without interruption. The indigenous nations, flourishing in their own right, would have developed unique systems of exchange, driven by the natural resources abundant in their lands. These trade networks would likely have been complex and diverse, reflecting the rich variety of cultures and environments across the continent. From the gold of the Andes to the fur of the northern forests, the Americas were a treasure trove of commodities. And let's not forget the agricultural wealth. After all, the Americas were the birthplace of crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes, foods that revolutionized diets worldwide. Without European intervention, these goods might have been traded across vast distances, perhaps even reaching the shores of Asia and Africa through independent exploration. This would have created a global market vastly different from the one we know today, with the Americas playing a central role. Now let's consider agriculture. The indigenous peoples of the Americas were skilled farmers, cultivating a wide variety of crops in innovative ways. Imagine how these agricultural practices might have spread and influenced farming worldwide, promoting biodiversity and sustainable land use. All of this paints a picture of an alternate world where the Americas, free from colonial control, shaped global economic trends and practices. The global economy might have developed along completely different lines. Cultural exchanges would have been fundamentally different. In a world where the Americas remained untouched by European colonization, cultural diversity would have flourished in an unprecedented manner. With no external influence to shape their societies, indigenous cultures would have developed organically, cultivating unique philosophies, art forms, and social structures. Picture a vibrant tapestry of distinct societies, each with its own narrative, yet intertwined through cultural exchanges. Imagine the Mayans with their advanced understanding of astronomy, sharing their knowledge with other civilizations, or the Inca, renowned for their architectural prowess, influencing global building techniques. Native American tribes, with their rich oral traditions, could have contributed significantly to world literature. The absence of colonization would also have allowed for the preservation and growth of indigenous languages. This linguistic diversity could have resulted in a world where thousands of languages coexisted, each carrying a unique worldview, shaping our understanding of reality in a multitude of ways. Philosophical exchanges would have been equally fascinating. Indigenous philosophies, deeply rooted in nature and spirituality, could have introduced alternative perspectives to the world, fostering a broader understanding of existence. Without the dominance of European thought, the world may have seen a blend of philosophies. Indigenous wisdom intermingling with Eastern and African philosophies could have led to a more holistic understanding of our place in the universe. The world could have been a melting pot of unique cultural exchanges. A world rich in cultural diversity, where knowledge is shared freely and new ideas are born from the confluence of diverse perspectives. The environment would have been impacted differently. Picture a world where the vast landscapes of the Americas remain largely untouched by industrialization, where the Amazon rainforest still thrives in its full glory, and the Great Plains stretch out as endless seas of grassland. Indigenous populations had a profound respect for the land, viewing it as a communal resource, not a commodity to be exploited. Their practices of agriculture were largely sustainable, utilizing methods such as slash and burn to enrich the soil and crop rotation to maintain its fertility. The concept of land ownership, as we know it today, was foreign to them. Land wasn't seen as an asset to be bought, sold, or hoarded, but rather a shared resource to be cared for and respected. Biodiversity, too, might have been different. The Americas are home to a myriad of unique species, many of which have been pushed to the brink of extinction due to habitat loss and human interference. Without the pressures of industrial farming, urbanization, and resource extraction, these species could have thrived, leading to a continent rich in biological diversity. But let's not paint too rosy a picture. Indigenous societies also faced environmental challenges. Overhunting and overfishing, for instance, could have led to species depletion, yet their deep-seated respect for the natural world could have led to innovative solutions to these problems. The Americas could have been a haven of biodiversity and sustainable land use. Fast forward to the present day in this alternate world. Imagine a map of the globe not divided by the familiar national borders we know today, but carved up by the territories of powerful indigenous nations. The Aztec Empire, the Inca Kingdom, the Iroquois Confederacy, the Sioux Nation, among others, might have evolved into modern sovereign states, each wielding considerable geopolitical influence. In Europe, without the wealth extracted from the Americas, nations like Spain and Portugal might not have risen to the same heights of power. Instead, other regions, such as Asia, could have emerged as the dominant global powerhouses. The process of globalization would have likely unfolded differently as well. Rather than being driven by European expansion and colonialism, it might have been a more balanced and reciprocal process. Trade networks would have spanned the globe, linking together diverse cultures and economies in a web of mutual exchange. The world economy might have been built on a broader mix of commodities, not just those introduced by European colonizers. Imagine a world where corn, potatoes, and tomatoes are considered exotic delicacies, only recently introduced to the global market. Culturally, the world would be vastly diverse. Indigenous philosophies, scientific knowledge, and artistic traditions would have had the chance to develop and spread, influencing global culture in profound ways. The global environmental landscape might also be significantly different. Indigenous land management practices centered around sustainability and respect for nature could have become the norm, leading to a more ecologically balanced world. In this speculative modern world, the geopolitical power centers would not be New York, London, or Beijing, but Tenochtitlan, Cusco, or Cahokia. The world's wealthiest nations might be those with the largest reserves of maize, not oil. This alternate history paints a picture of a world that is strikingly different from our own, yet eerily familiar. It's a world that celebrates diversity, values sustainability, and is built on mutual respect and cooperation. Today's world could have been fundamentally different in this uncolonized America's scenario. Every course of history has its own set of challenges and conflicts, This holds true even in our speculative narrative where the Americas remained uncolonized. Now, let's delve into the potential internal and external issues that might have arisen in this alternative history. Internally, indigenous nations, each with their unique cultures, languages, and customs, might have faced challenges in maintaining unity and peace. With increasing technological advancements and population growth, competition over resources could have intensified, leading to conflicts. Moreover, the development of distinct political ideologies within these nations might have resulted in power struggles and civil unrest. Externally, while the absence of European colonization would have shielded the Americas from certain threats, other external forces could have posed challenges. For instance, the Mongols, who had established a vast empire across Asia, might have turned their expansionist gaze towards the Americas. Additionally, the African kingdoms, flourishing in the absence of the transatlantic slave trade, might have sought to establish trade networks with the Americas, potentially leading to instances of cultural imperialism or economic domination. In the modern era, the rise of global powers in other parts of the world could have put pressure on the independent Americas, leading to potential geopolitical tensions. Even in this alternate history, challenges and conflicts would have been inevitable. But it's essential to remember that these struggles also lead to growth, resilience, and innovation, shaping societies in unique and impactful ways. An alternate history of the Americas presents a fascinating what-if scenario. We've journeyed through a speculative narrative, a world where the indigenous societies of the Americas flourished, unfettered by colonization. We've seen their potential for growth, technological and cultural advancements, and their impact on the global political landscape. We've explored an alternate global economy, shaped by distinct trade networks and agricultural exchanges, and a rich tapestry of cultural diversity, scientific and philosophical knowledge. We've envisioned a world where environmental considerations were woven into the fabric of societal development, promoting land conservation and biodiversity. We've navigated the challenges and conflicts, both internal and external, that could have arisen in this uncolonized world. This journey through an alternate history not only highlights the resilience and potential of indigenous societies, but also prompts a reevaluation of the impacts of colonization on the world. In this uncharted course of history, we find a world rich in cultural and ecological diversity, fundamentally altering our understanding of global development and interconnection.